Hey folks, back again by popular demand, Paul Craig Roberts, and this time to talk about the Epstein files, the Epstein case, and the Epstein fallout against Trump. Now, Paul, it seems obvious to me that Trump has lost some credibility, and I think permanently, even among the MAGA people, especially among the MAGA faithful, who thought he was a straight shooter all along. The way he shut down this Epstein case and the way he's double talked around it, and it was in a clumsy way. I think even though some of this may fade because of other issues over time, I don't think the MAGA people and people in general are ever going to be free of their suspicion that maybe this guy isn't playing it straight after all. How do you see it? Because remember, when the reporter asked him about the Epstein, oh, he was still talking about Epstein, there's other more important things. It was so obvious that he didn't want to talk about. So I think his credibility is permanently diminished. What do you think?
I think it's hurt him, for sure. Whether it's hurt him with all the MAGA people or not, I can't say, but I think it's definitely hurt him with a significant percentage of his supporters. Uh, I think it's unfortunate, not so much from Trump's standpoint, but you see what's happening with the Epstein saga. It's being used like Russiagate against Trump. And the main thing it's doing is it's diverting everybody's attention from what appears to be the fact that Epstein was a Mossad agent and he was not running a sex trafficking operation, selling sex with underage kids to people. He was running a honey trap, collecting blackmail information on the American ruling elite, including apparently two American presidents.
Yeah, in fact, Paul, what isn't mentioned by the media, interestingly enough, is Ghislaine Maxwell's connection with Mossad. Her father was connected with Mossad. Now, that should raise suspicion among all these investigative reporters on network, in high esteem, that maybe there is some kind of connection to at least be explored. But that's not even mentioned. Maxwell's connection, her father's connection with Mossad, which is well known.
Yes, if they mention it, they're fired. You
Yeah.
know, you can't mention it. Not in the media. It's difficult even for me to be able to mention it, or for you to have me on a program mentioning it. That's difficult enough. But to get back to your question and to the point, uh, this is being cleverly turned, not so much to do Trump in, but to protect the fact that Israel has enough blackmail control over the American establishment that it can ensure that American foreign policy in the Middle East aligns perfectly with Israel's. And it has
Yeah.
for the duration of the 21st century. What all our wars in the Middle East were about, it was not about a war on terrorism and bringing democracy. It was about destroying the opponents to Greater Israel. So Israel successfully used the American military and the American money to destroy five countries that Israel considered in the way of Greater Israel, that is, their expansion.
Yeah.
And as soon as they had the chance, they started occupying the southern part of Syria. And just the other day, they bombed Syria without clearing it with Trump. And he's trying to rebuild the place. And so they go in and bomb it. So he can't say anything. What can he do? If you think about it, Larry, remember recently, Netanyahu was in the White House. It was his third visit in 6 months. Nobody else has had 3 visits with the President of the United States in 6 months. I think this is probably unparalleled in history. But look now, everyone thought this was about Iran because they had just had all this hullabaloo over Iran. We had bombed Iran for Israel because Israel's weapons couldn't do the job on the alleged nuclear sites. It's not clear ours did either, but we bombed them. And Netanyahu was pressuring Trump to use nukes against the Iranian sites. And he comes to America. So it looks like this is about Iran. Well, have you noticed? Not a peep, not a joint press conference, not a single report of what Netanyahu and Trump discussed. Nothing. Nothing has even leaked out what they discussed. There's been no report. Here is the third visit in 6 months. Iran's in the news. And there's nothing. There's no report. Now, this is extremely suspicious. This is more suspicious than the way Trump handled the Epstein, the release of the Epstein documents.
Yeah,
So why was Netanyahu here?
yeah, yeah, because
He was here to stop the release of any documents because it will show Epstein is a Mossad agent collecting blackmail information on the American ruling elite. And if that is shown, all of this blackmail information becomes worthless because it's public.
yeah.
And so all of the expense and the years of Mossad accumulating this immaculate blackmail power over America is squandered if Trump releases these papers. So I think that's far more important than whether these papers are far more likely to be the explanation of why the papers were withheld,
It,
not to protect Trump. So I'm sure Israel is working through all of their media contacts to protect themselves, to protect Mossad, and to transform this into a Trump problem. He was on the Lolita Express.
well, Paul, you mentioned the compliant media, cooperating with Israel's containment of the story. However, what I find interesting is even Fox News, which is usually all in for Israel, every newscast, they're supporting Israel. But even Fox has mentioned Mossad recently. Greg Gutfeld, the guy that's on at 10 o'clock, he said recently that it was a honeypot intel operation involving the CIA and foreign governments, plural. And then a guest on the panel with him said a few moments later that, well, there's a lot of stuff on the internet about Mossad being involved. So, I mean, that wasn't even mentioned on Fox before, so, which really floored me. And of course, on your site, you post something from Tucker Carlson where he outright says it was Mossad, the CIA, and all that. Tucker is now out of the mainstream media, but he has his own website, so he's freer to say that. But he said that, and so what I'm saying is, I'm trying to put this together, how this all gels, because even Fox News, which is always all out in support for Israel, allowed the mention of Mossad recently.
Yeah, but you see, they said CIA and other intelligence agencies. So
Gutfeld said that, and then
that's not really mentioning Assad. In other words, this is a very clever way of saying, yeah, there was a honey trap, but it was the CIA. Now think about it. Why would the CIA do that? What are they going to get out of it? They're already unaccountable. They do whatever the hell they want.
But like Israel gives them more control of American politicians.
They don't need control because they're not accountable. This, they, no one. Look, they get away with everything. They get away with killing President Kennedy, killing his brother. I mean, really. Uh, I think it's just the way that the Israel lobby keeps it off of Israel. Here it's the CIA was running the honey trap. Oh, and maybe some other intelligence agencies. Well, why would the CIA want to give other intelligence agencies control over their government? They wouldn't. It makes no sense whatsoever. There's no, what does the CIA gain from letting other countries have the power to blackmail the United States? There's no gain from that. So I see, look, I've told you before how Angleton explains there's
Ex-
always red herrings, and there's a whole packet of more red herrings to release to keep everyone's focus off of the real fact.
Explain who Angleton was.
He was the head of the CIA counterintelligence.
Yeah. A legendary spy, James Jesus Angleton. Yeah.
Yeah. And
And you spoke to him personally, and he told you this one.
yeah, yeah, I've reported it several times what he said. How so? I don't
Is that,
believe any of
that
that. I
cabinet?
don't believe any of that about the CIA or other intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
This was look. Where did Epstein was a math teacher? Where did he get $1 billion?
No curiosity about that. By the way, is that cat wearing a wire? Paul, you better be careful.
Wearing a wire?
A wire.
Oh no. Oh, he's my buddy. He would tear him up and eat them for me.
Well, he's listening intently to our conversation, so I don't know.
Oh, he's just very affectionate, and he has a habit. If I'm at the computer, he comes and keeps me company. And
I've been through that
that's
myself.
just what he does. He turns over on his back and wants me to rub his tummy, and he wants to play and nibble at me, and he's just a good friend, really, he is. And he actually minds. He knows what I'm saying.
Yeah. They're more intelligent than most of us think.
Yeah. So
But
to get back to the point, I mean, I'm very interested in the cat, but I think that this is, I think all of the real evidence, none of which receives any attention except from me, is that why was Netanyahu here? To kill any release of the Epstein documents. He had to do that, not only because they would embarrass Israel, but because they would make all of that blackmail information useless. If it's public, it can't be used.
yeah,
And and now and since it's getting out that there was a honey trap, then okay, let's blame the CIA. All right, that works. We blame the CIA. And the American population, but particularly the people in the media today, I mean, they're different from your generation.
yeah.
They haven't the foggiest idea how things really work. They've nowhere to learn. They've nowhere to ever learned. And so, oh yeah, it was the CIA. It's nonsensical. Why would the CIA do that? It's a risk. They don't need to take a risk. They're unaccountable. Who's ever held them accountable? Nobody. Look, John Brennan committed treason. He's not indicted.
Yeah.
So to get back to the subject, I think that it's very unfortunate that Trump supporters are more interested in the prurient aspect of this, sex with underage kids, than they are with the real damning impact that the American establishment is compromised and cannot act differently from Israel's interests. there's no other way to explain why we destroy it at our expense and the lives of our soldiers. 5 countries. And we're about to start on the 6th.
You're,
And
you're,
I think,
you're referring to the real reason that we had 9/11.
yeah, 9/11 was an orchestration to create the new Pearl Harbor that they could use to pull the wool over the insouciant American population's eyes and go to war in the Middle East against Israel's enemies. And that's was all it was about. It's not about anything else. Where were the terrorists? How many terrorist acts were there other than 9/11? None. They were so non-existent that, remember, the FBI had to go around organizing fake terrorist operations using deranged people or weird groups, and they would entrap these people in a terrorist organization organized by the FBI. And then just before it was to happen, they would arrest them and say, "We've saved the country." And it turned out, you know why they were doing that? One reason was they had to have terrorism to keep the stupid American population thinking the terrorists were going to get them. And we had to go to the Middle East. You remember the phrase, "We got to get them over there or they'll come over here."
Right, right.
This was the language of the George W. Bush administration. Everybody fell for that. The American people are not smart. It's just, they're just clueless. And so, well, what do you want to say?
Well, another example of that, I think I mentioned this before, the strange lack of curiosity among the investigative reporters, and also the lack of logical thinking among the American public in general, along the lines of what you were saying. For instance, what could be more obvious to raise suspicion than a day and a half after the towers fell, they found the intact passport, supposedly of the chief organizer of the attack. In all the debris, everything was, ashes and was
Yeah,
molten metal, but the
yeah,
intact passport within a day and a half showing, aha, you see, that was the lead hijacker. And
right.
nobody gave a second thought to how suspicious that was.
That's right. They can't find any of the massive engines,
Right.
not a bit. But here's the undamaged passport lying right on top of the road.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's possible, the odds are extreme, but, that should at least raise some curiosity, whether that's a straight story, some suspicion among all these, esteemed reporters on national news. Nothing, which,
Well, even worse than that, Larry, because you may remember after the 9/11 Commission report came out, both the co-chairman, the two co-chairmen, and the chief legal counsel wrote books in which they said the commission was set up to fail, that information was withheld from us, that military people who testified committed perjury, and we considered sending it to the Department of Justice for prosecution, but were pressured out of it. And nobody reviewed these books and said, "Hey, look what they really said. They're disavowing the 9/11 Commission report. Look what they really said."
I can't remember any network carrying that story.
It was never mentioned.
Similar to the Warren Commission, which was a control organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all of these commissions are controlled. None of them are independent. And they know they can't tell the truth because it will destroy the American people's belief in their government. You see, everybody on the Warren Commission knew that Oswald hadn't killed Kennedy. They all knew that. Everyone knew it. But they also knew if we tell the people that Kennedy was killed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA, they would lose all confidence in the government. Here we are locked in a Cold War with the Soviet Union. We've just had the Cuban Missile Crisis. How can we shake the confidence of the people in the government? We can't do it. So we got to concoct a story. It always works this way. The same thing with 9/11.
And the same thing with Epstein.
And the same thing with Epstein, I think now, yeah, we can't let the people know they will lose confidence in their government. And Netanyahu says you can't let them go because it'll ruin our ability to blackmail you. So there the pressures are double barreled. And I bet you Trump got called on twice. You see, if he thought he was implicated in this, why did he say we're going to release the documents? When the Attorney General Bondi said, "I've got it all here. It's awful. It's horrible. We're going to release it." That had to have been cleared by Trump. So if he thought there was anything in there doing him in, he never would have gone that far. Nobody is going to, who knows he's implicated, is going to say, yeah, let's release the information. It shows I'm implicated. So his reversal can't be because he's worried about himself, unless he's learned or fears that some of the left-wing people and the agencies have stuck in false documents like they created for Russiagate. They could do that with Epstein. And he may have thought, okay, they've loaded this up against me. But I think the real reason is Netanyahu called on him. And before that, the men in black called him. Who are the men in black? They are the organized lobbyists, the groups that are lobby protected. And they called on the president. I call them the men in black. Some people call them the globalists, the deep state, they have different names, but the men in black. And they called on Trump and said, look, you can't release this. There are too many of our leaders implicated, and it will destroy the confidence of the American people in their ruling class. And what's Trump going to say? I'm going to run over them. I'm going to do this. And they're going to say, well, no, you're not, Mr. President. It's not going to happen. And it isn't. It couldn't for those two reasons. He can't go against the men in black. We've already seen that. Look, who are the men in black? Once again, it's not an organized conspiracy. It's the lobbyist for the military security complex, the lobbyist for big pharma, the lobbyist for agribusiness. It's the people who actually make the policies. The legislation that gets passed is not written by senators and congressmen or their aides.
Right.
Handed to them by their campaign donors. It's handed to them by the lobby industry in Washington, which is massive and highly paid. It's the reason for the astronomical property values. So when Trump's confronted with that, what can he do? If you run over the men in black, or try to, then what's going to happen is the men in black are going to call on the congressmen and the senators on the rhinos. They're going to call on the rhinos, and they're going to get enough rhinos to vote with the Democrats to impeach Trump and then convict him, and then he'll be prosecuted. And I'm sure that's been explained to him, and that's the real position that he's in.
Considering all that, Paul, Yeah, what's Trump's fate in terms of surviving in one way or the other his second term fully, or even in getting his agenda enacted, much of his agenda. Now, he's done a lot so far, but considering these developments, what do you project for the rest of his term?
It's over with. He's not going to be able to do any more. He
Really?
did some good things. He closed the border more or less, and he stopped the DEI inside the government. The DEI policy refused hiring and promotion to white heterosexual males. They even did this in the Pentagon, in the military. You remember the black chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff said all promotions for white males are on hold until we have the DEI complexion that we think we need.
Yeah,
So, in other words, it was an attack on a merit-based society.
right.
So, so Trump has done a good thing. He's restored as best he can a merit-based society, and he's closed the border. Now, in the merit-based society, we now have numerous instances. This James O'Keefe that goes around with a mic and gets people to rat on themselves. He's turned up case after case of officials in these agencies saying, well, Trump thinks he's closed DEI, but we're still operating it. And it still is being operated because how does he know? He can say he can get the policy declared over, but he can't end it. So that this, how many supervisors are there in the bureaucracy? There are millions of people working there. There's no way he can know what they're doing. So that's what he did. Now look, the men in black, they blocked him on tariffs. All those tariffs he announced, all the men in black went and said, you can't do that, we'll lose money. This is going to hurt us. So what did you notice about the tariff list? Exempt, 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 exempt. The list became empty. Well, who did that? The men in black. What else did you notice? The deportations? Oh, agribusiness. The men in black from agribusiness knocked on his door and said, oh, no, you can't take away our workforce. So who's exempt? Restaurant workers, farm workers, chicken slaughterhouse workers? Oh, yeah, they can't be deported. So there you see what I'm talking about. The men in black, that's who they are. They are the organized lobbyists. Each powerful economic sector has them. The financial sector has them. It's not only the Israel lobby that have men in black. It's every important economic organized group. And there are probably other groups that aren't economic. Look what happened to Robert F. Kennedy, the Secretary of Health. He has been going on for years about the dangers of the vaccines, especially the COVID one. We now have undeniable, overwhelming proof that the COVID shot killed and damaged the health of millions of people. It's no longer debatable. You can't, it's just an absolute total fact. What could Robert Kennedy do about it? He couldn't even stop the CDC recommending continue to recommend the COVID vax.
Yeah.
All he could do was to stop the recommendation for healthy children and pregnant women, but not for anybody else. So they still are recommending the COVID vax. Now, he's the Secretary of Health, so he clearly hasn't got the power of Big Pharma. Look what else happened to Robert Kennedy. He's been going on for years about glyphosate. It's the chemical they spray on all the crops because it destroys the weeds, but not
Right.
growing crops. It's very toxic. It's now polluted the earth, the air, the water, the underground water tables. They're finding it more and more in people's bodies. What what did he have to announce? Oh, glyphosate is such an important part of agribusiness production function that we can't deny it to them. Well, is this Trump's fault? No. This is the constraint. You see, once you have money in government, money in politics, once you have money in politics, and remember now the Supreme Court ruling that said that lobbyists have the right to purchase the government, that was the ruling.
Yeah.
They were already doing that. This just gave them the clearance so nobody could make an issue of it. Well, once lobbyists can purchase the government responds to the lobbyist. So the notion of the public interest just disappears. You can't serve any public interest if it contravenes a private organized interest.
Yeah, so a lot of these men in black then, I would have assumed that they were government people, but you're saying a lot of them are civilians, civilian lobbyists.
They're the people in charge to be babysitters for the Congress and the White House and the agency heads to make sure they do not rule in ways that hurt their interest. You may remember recently, there's the representative in the House, the Republican, and his name starts with an M, and I can't ever remember it. It's an ordinary name. He reported that he was the only member of the House that didn't have an Israeli babysitter. That they had come to him offering a babysitter to be sure that he voted right. And he said, no, thanks. But all their other members have the babysitter. Well, it's not just Israel that has a babysitter watching over people to be sure. This is why Netanyahu, in the middle of conducting a genocide, can be asked to address the joint session of Congress and get 53 standing ovations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they've all got Israeli babysitters saying, invite him here. We want to clear him of this genocide. Invite him, let him speak, get up and clap. And so they perform. That's what they have to do. Well, it's not just Israel that has babysitters. All of these powerful interest groups, military security complex, agribusiness, big pharma, they go on and on. Finance, Wall Street and finance. I mean, these are powerful entities. No government can go against them today. Now, a long time ago, you could. But now they just have too much power because it's not the people voting that shape policy, it's the campaign contributions.
Yeah. Illegalized bribery. It shouldn't be allowed.
Yeah, well, if you can't take the money out of politics, you cannot have a government that's accountable to the people.
Yeah.
How can you take all this money that gets you elected and then put the people's interests above the interests of the people who finance you? You can't do that. You'll be gone the next election.
Yeah, and as I've said a number of times, even somebody who goes into Congress or the Senate with good intentions and an honest approach, if he's going to survive, he has to compromise, which means the campaign contributions and all that. Otherwise, as you say, they're gone. And by the way, Paul, as we've done before, we should make clear at this point, for those out there who are ready to call us anti-Semitic, there's a distinction between criticizing the policies of the Israeli government, which is in power, and being anti-Semitic. So, it's so easy to control any criticism of the Israeli government of any of their policies by simply labeling it anti-Semitic as a way of shutting down any analysis and criticism. And,
Well,
we,
that's why they created it, and that's how they use it. Yeah, and I think there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that. It's okay to be anti-American, and look how many of us are anti-Russian, and anti-Chinese, and anti-Cuban, and anti-Venezuelan, and anti-Iranian, and anti-Muslim. I mean, you can be anti-everybody but Israel.
yeah. And,
And and you and nobody who's anti-Russian or Muslim or American or German can be arrested for it or denied a government contract. But if you say something critical, even if it's 100% right, of Israel, even in red states like Texas and Florida, you cannot work for the government. You cannot have a government contract. Well, how did they gain that power? The same person who says something critical of Israel can say all he wants about Americans.
no,
So even the official laws of red states act for Israel's benefit. So the notion that they don't have any power or control is absurd. I mean, you see it everywhere.
no,
We've talked about it before. They reached into a Catholic university and blocked the tenure of Norman Finkelstein, a Jew.
yeah,
They reached into the faculty of the University of Illinois and withdrew the granted tenure to the faculty person that the University of Illinois had hired away from Virginia. They can do whatever the hell they want. And everybody defends it. I mean, look what's been going on in Gaza now. I mean, it's 680 something days, mass murder. We now have the Israeli soldiers publicly stating that they are ordered to shoot babies in the head while they are in their mother's arms, standing in line in food distribution centers, waiting for a bit of food and water. I mean, are these soldiers that they're anti-Semites?
yeah.
It's so the anti-Semite applies to Jews.
Yeah, well, any Jew who speaks out against some of this stuff
Yeah,
there's another control mechanism. They label them a self-hating Jew.
yeah,
So anything he says that's critical doesn't
yeah,
isn't valid.
yeah. So, and but once again, it's not just Israel that has this power. There are a lot of men in black. They're not all Israelis
Yeah,
or Israel lobby men in black. There are a lot of men in black. And as I've said, we've seen Big Pharma block Kennedy. We've seen agribusiness block Trump. Uh, If so, you asked about Trump. Okay, here's what I think. I think that his domestic situation is over, um, and he'll accept that because he knows he can't do anything else. Or he can't do anything that the men in black disapprove of. it'll be too risky. So this makes him, I think, more dangerous because to be in the limelight, where can he go now? Abroad. Wars. Uh, the situation in Ukraine is far from being resolved. In fact, it's spinning out of control, just like I've been saying on your program for all these years. It's now about to be out of control because no one in the Trump administration, no one in the European governments or NATO or the EU have listened to what Putin has said. Putin has said over and over, it's not important to me to end the war with negotiation. What's important is to deal with the root cause of the war. What is the root cause? It is the absence of a mutual security agreement between the United States, the West, and Russia. And so he wants a mutual security agreement. If we have a mutual security agreement, the war's over. Trump doesn't hear it. No one hears it. They instead issue demands. You got 50 days to do what I said. Well, what did you say? Make an agreement. Well, what is the agreement? No one's seen the agreement. Trump's never described it. What is the agreement? Putin can't make an agreement with Zelensky because the war is between the United States and Russia. It's not between Zelensky. How can he give Russia a mutual security agreement with the West? He can't. So either Trump is stupid and doesn't understand what Putin tells him, or he's not interested in having an end to the conflict.
Or is it being controlled by other forces?
The military security complex men in black, they clearly don't want to lose an enemy. If they lose an enemy, they lose budget and power. If they lose power, the men in black don't get the same attention when they knock on the door of the senators and representatives. So, and they don't have the same clout with the media, leaking the false story that they want portrayed to the people. Yeah, but and it could be that's why he doesn't hear.
Yeah,
And we have the Iranian thing is sitting there. The last we heard, Netanyahu was lobbying the United States use its nukes.
yeah.
Well, I don't think Netanyahu is going to be content that we only destroy 5 countries because the list is 7. And Iran is probably the most important from Netanyahu's perspective. So I would say, how are we going to avoid the Israeli pressure to go to war with Iran, especially when they have all this blackmail information on everybody? How are you going to avoid it? And then we have the situation with China. They're stirring that up. What for? How can everybody knows, everybody in the American foreign policy community, I don't think there's anybody today who thinks we can go to war with Russia, Iran, and China at the same time and not get our butts kicked. But that's what we're doing. Everything points to stirring up war, stirring it up.
Is there an overall plan to destroy the United States, destroy the West?
I think it's going to happen because of the Zionist neoconservative doctrine of American hegemony. It's just us trying to impose our hegemony. This is the American foreign policy community has not repudiated the doctrine, the Wolfowitz doctrine of American hegemony.
Yeah.
It's been the principal goal of our foreign policy since it was declared, I think, in 1991. And no one has said, hey, this is a dangerous, dangerous foreign policy. Don't you think we should revise it? Even Trump, the man of peace, he hasn't said, hey, we got to revise this doctrine. It's getting us in all kind of trouble. Uh, the notion it's absurd that we're going to impose hegemony on China and Russia. I mean, why do we have such a dangerous, unachievable goal?
Yeah.
Don't you think we should get something that might work? Well, no one has said that. If you read the foreign policy stuff, it's all we got to get them, we got to get them, we got to get them.
Well, Paul,
We're not asserting ourselves strong enough. You
it,
hear all this crap. Well, it's impossible. And
Paul, the architects of it and those who are still endorsing and pushing it, perpetuating it, they're not smart enough to realize that it's undoable, that it's ultimately destructive to us, or they don't care, or
I think it's just institutionalized. It's institutionalized, and you can't go against it because it's the pattern. Um, you know, it's what's known. It's how they think, and everything's based on it.
even though it makes no sense,
It makes no sense.
they don't realize.
But this is a common thing among humans. You know, Thomas Kuhn was a philosopher, and also my professor at Oxford, Michael Polanyi. They both pointed out that it was very difficult in science itself, which is supposed to rely on nothing but facts and tests of facts, to change a paradigm, a scientific paradigm that was wrong.
Good point. Good point.
Even the scientists
Yeah.
resist.
They're supposed to be completely logical, based only on the real evidence. Even they get caught up in a certain.
It's not. And I remember my professor at Oxford, he was a famous physical chemist, later a famous philosopher. Um, when he was a young man recuperating from typhus in a hospital, he wrote his thesis in physical chemistry, and the world was astounded. The scientific world said, my word, this is a brilliant. It was a theory of chemical absorption. And all the scientists started praising this young guy and this study and all this. And then Einstein and Fritz Haber, these were the two, number one and number two. And they said, what is this theory? And they called a conference to hear about it. And they stood up and accused Polanyi of scientific ignorance. And the whole scientific world had already, so the whole scientific world abandoned their support. Okay. And now it just so happened Polanyi was so gifted and he made so many other discoveries. It didn't hurt his career. He went on. It normally would have destroyed him right there. See, he went on. Now, listen to me. 40 something years later, two young scientists, University of California, Berkeley, rediscovered exactly the same theory. They publish it. The whole scientific world says, this is wonderful, a great discovery. And then a few of the old guys said, wait a minute, that's Polanyi's old error. And they said, what do you mean error? There's no error here. And they weren't any more Einstein and Fritz Haber, and the kind of power that they had diffused and was kind of, it wasn't there. And it turned out they had to accept this was absolutely, totally correct. So all the scientific journals rushed to Polanyi. He was an older man, still alive, and said, how could this happen? How could science make such a mistake? And he said, there's a lot of authority in science, a lot of authority in a paradigm. And the way Einstein and Fritz Haber, their explanations of the ruling paradigm at the time, didn't allow for my theory. And so the paradigm was stronger than the evidence. And it took 40-something years for this theory to be rediscovered, published, again hailed as brilliant, and then said, oh, it's the old error from Michael Polanyi. And then, no error here, buddy. This, and then it's accepted. So then they have to go to Polanyi and say, how did this mistake happen? Well, this, I think, explains why the Wolfowitz doctrine is the principal statement of American foreign policy, despite its unrealism. You have to remember now, when it was declared, it's very realistic. Why? Because the Soviet Union collapsed.
Right.
NATO was a nothing. This is 1991. All obstacles to American unilateralism had disappeared.
Right.
So it made sense. So you've been teaching it now for 3 decades. You've had all these generations of foreign policy students learning it. It's the way everybody thinks. They've been thinking like that for a long time. And all the discussions take place in that format. And it was already fairly strong because of the liberal doctrine of American interventionism, of American exceptionalism. You see, there was already a foundation for Wolfowitz's hegemonic doctrine, because the liberals had always said, oh, America is exceptional, and which meant that we should be leading, pushing people around, deciding, because we knew best and we were well-intentioned. And so it really goes, the support for this hegemony goes back before the Wolfowitz doctrine. You see what I mean? The Wolfowitz doctrine was actually rooted in the liberal notion of American exceptionalism, of our involvement in the world. And our involvement meant, of course, our interest.
Yeah, Paul, I think generally we could extract from this that despite the advancement of knowledge and supposed logic, human emotion and groupthink always trumps logic.
Yeah, at least for a long time, or can for a long time. And I think I tried to explain that and give examples even in science. The strength in an existing paradigm is very strong.
Yeah.
And um, so this was,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my take on the whole Ukraine situation and Putin's objections amount to two things. They're talking about joining NATO, which is a danger to an escalation of conflict with the West, and also the attack on the Donbass region, which is largely Russian culturally and language and all that. So, yeah, everything was stable in Ukraine for so many years until Victoria Nuland and the State Department and others started to change that by deposing the president of Ukraine, installing a puppet, then the attacks on the Donbass region, and all the talk about joining NATO. Those were the two leading causes of Putin objecting and resisting, correct?
yeah, sure.
Yeah. And
In fact, he was forced.
that
He
is
was,
never mentioned in the mainstream media.
no, it's all Putin's fault. He's an aggressor.
Yeah,
He wants to, after Ukraine, he's going to take over all of Europe.
yeah,
See, this is the old stuff I heard as a kid, about the Soviets.
right.
They they were coming to get everybody. And yeah, the Warsaw Pact, which was the Soviet organization of Eastern Europe, that didn't happen until 5 years after NATO.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we created the Soviet threat. We created it because it served the power and profit of the military security complex. And President Eisenhower told us that in 1961.
Yeah.
He
Staunch.
told us that.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. A big
Yeah.
Republican, and he saw that what was really going.
He was a five-star general.
Yeah. Yeah. Another analogy I always use is that 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. When Khrushchev brought nuclear missiles 90 miles off our shore, that was a direct threat. We almost went to war with the then Soviet Union. Now we're bringing missiles closer and closer to Russia's border and firing into Russia proper. And Putin is just supposed to think that that's okay.
Yeah. And so far he does. He says it's not an act of war, it's a terrorist act. So I don't have to evoke Russian war doctrine like I'm required to under law. I can ignore it because it's a terrorist act, not an act of war. So his response in many ways is good. It saves us, or at least it puts the war off, but it encourages more provocations. We've talked about this for years, and I think we've reached the point where the next provocation is probably the one he can't ignore, because you saw where Trump asked Zelensky, if we give you the missiles, can you hit Moscow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that's now if I don't, I mean, Putin might be inclined to say that's a terrorist act, not an act of war, so I don't have to do anything about it. But I'm just not sure the military and the rest of the government is going to let him at that point. They're going to say, look, we've had enough of this. It's not an act of war stuff. And we're certainly not going to be under missile attack and have you do nothing about it.
Well, Moscow's already been hit, at least the outskirts of it a couple of times already, hasn't it?
Drones, yeah, and the airports. The
Yeah.
airports have been I think there are four airports in Moscow or in the Moscow area. They've all been closed.
Yeah.
These are drone attacks, and um, it may be, and I don't know, that some of these drone attacks are like the ones that they used on the Russian strategic bombing fleet. Uh, they sent in trucks from Ukraine
Right.
with the drones in the trucks, and somehow the roof would open and they could be fired off the trucks. And they drove the trucks right up close to the sites before they fired them. And so there really wasn't any chance of catching them on radar coming in because they were already inside Russia,
Yeah.
positioned near the targets. And I don't know if they're doing that with the Moscow airports or not. Now, I asked how in the world these trucks full of drones get into Russia, and the answer I got is that the Kremlin continues to conduct trade with Ukraine, and trucks just pass back and forth across the border. They're not even checked. They're just streaming in and out like this. Yeah.
How, how does that happen?
It, it's uh, it's a it's Putin's totally unserious attitude toward the conflict. He's totally unserious about it. He's not interested in it. He's trying to use it, as I've said many times, to get a mutual security agreement, a great power agreement, a new Yalta. The Russian Academy of Sciences even had a conference some years ago about a new Yalta. They asked me to address them. They didn't want to hear what I had to say once I started talking. But I think that's it. To him, he had to go into Donbass because we were about to unleash the Ukrainian army we had trained and armed on the two independent republics to conquer them and bring them back into Ukraine. You know, you have to remember that at Donbass, when we overthrew the government in Ukraine, And the puppet government we put in, it was sort of neo-Nazi, and they started persecuting the Russian territories, the people in the Russian territories. They were being persecuted, and then the territories formed some kind of resistance. And so then they came under attack, and they were subject to artillery shelling. A lot of civilians were killed. And these two independent republics, self-declared in Donbass, had formed militias, and they were pretty effective at stopping further advances of Ukraine. But now we were about to unleash the army, and Putin knew it would be a massacre of Russians, and there's no way he could survive that in Russia if he didn't do anything about it. So that forced him into it. I think it was all planned by Washington because we wanted the war. We thought that it would destabilize his government
Right.
and all of this, and apparently it didn't. It seemed to strengthen it, at least initially. So this whole thing became very dangerous when we found out his red lines didn't mean anything. And so that encouraged us to get more and more aggressive in the things we did. And, you know, we've gone through this before. Every weapon system we weren't going to send, we sent. And, and so now we're talking about sending missiles to hit Moscow. I saw today that the Germans are going to take their Phoenix missiles, which are American, and transfer them to Ukraine. Well, the Phoenix missiles will hit Moscow. So, and of course, a missile carries a much more destructive load than a drone. So, I think we may be headed into a very serious situation with Russia at the same time that Netanyahu may get us into a very serious situation with Iran. Well, what the hell are we going to do? How
Yeah.
are we going to deal with these two? We can't. And then China's sitting there. And just so that you and all your listeners can know, Washington, even under Trump, he may not even know about it. Um, Washington is currently doing all it can to organize color revolutions in the former Central Asian republics of the Soviet Union. Armenia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkestan, all of the former, these were all provinces of the Soviet Union who are now independent countries. So we're in there stirring the pot. There's been a lot of trouble between, was it Russia and Azerbaijan or Russia and Armenia? I think it's Azerbaijan. A lot of trouble. The Azerbaijanis have arrested a bunch of Russian newsmen, and the Russians have arrested some Azerbaijanis, and it's all getting a little bit hotter and hotter. And um, so, and there's still Washington's efforts to have another color revolution in Georgia. You know, the Soviets overcame the first one. I mean, the Russians overcame the first one, but now they're trying to do that again. Um, so, and of course, we're always working against China and that Chinese province that borders the former Central Asian republics of the Soviet Union. It's Muslim, and we're in there stirring the pot of these Muslims against China, and we're trying to cause all kinds of troubles. We're trying to bribe the Southeast Asian countries who've been cooperating with China with this new Silk Road. What do they call it? A road and something. They have a term for it. Chinese road and
Rodin. Yeah.
yeah, it's the new Silk Road concept. So we're trying to get create dissent among the East Asians that are cooperating with that. And of course, we're doing everything we can to stir up Taiwan and China. So if you look at this, where is the peace? I mean, there's no sign of peace. And uh, if and Europe is being organized by the week to prepare for war with Russia. You can see it. They talk about it. They admit it. And so
And,
Putin has miscalculated dramatically because by letting that war go on forever, it's widened so much now, he's facing not only us, but all of Europe organized for war against Russia. If he had knocked Ukraine out immediately, the whole thing would have been over with before anybody could have gotten involved.
you've been saying that constantly, Paul. So, Paul, Europe preparing for war with Russia. How does that not eventually go nuclear? I mean, Russia has to defend itself. So they're taking a chance that it won't go nuclear.
I, you know, I think there are among the American neoconservatives people who think we can win a nuclear war. And I've made references to them from time to time. Um, I don't know. I don't think they are thinking. I mean, why do they want war with Russia? Russia's doing nothing to them. What has Russia done to anybody? Nothing.
Well, like you say, the military industrial complex, they want to expand the budget, their purpose of being, and also they want to get their mitts on Russia for all the resources, right? There's a lot of profit if they take over Russia.
Yeah, but if there's been a nuclear war, there's nothing to take over and nobody to take it over.
I know it makes no sense. I mean, that's what I can't comprehend, how they don't think
Yeah,
that they're taking a huge risk that if it's nuclear, then there's nothing to grab.
that's right. It's a form of, I think, insanity and an inability to think. And once again, what is the Russian threat? What have they done?
Right,
They were forced into Donbass. They did not invade Ukraine.
right,
They went into the Russian territories that were formerly part of Russia,
right,
territories that Lenin and Khrushchev stuck into Ukraine because it was part of the Soviet Union and they wanted it there either for political or administrative reasons. And these are Russian people and they're being oppressed. And what's Putin supposed to do? He didn't have a choice. And we knew that. And Putin spent 8 years trying to deal with it with the Minsk agreement.
yeah,
He said Donbass should stay in Ukraine. They should stay in Ukraine. We don't want them, but they need uh, some autonomy so that they can have their own police force and not be oppressed. And this is what the Minsk agreement was supposed to give. So for 8 years, they made it clear he did not want Donbass. He did not want it. And the Minsk agreement was to keep it in Ukraine. And then we had the German chancellor and the French president say publicly, not too many, a year or two ago, hey, we used the Minsk agreement to fool the stupid old fool, Putin. We fooled him while we built this big army to attack Donbass and force him to intervene. Well, these are facts. This is not my opinion. These are just the facts. And so what has Russia done? They've done nothing. They've done everything they could not to have a conflict. Putin won't even acknowledge an American attack on Soviet strategic forces. He says, oh, it's an act of terrorism. Well, if somebody wanted to go to war, I mean, the Russian war doctrine called for Putin to push the button when that happens. And whoever did it knows that Russian war doctrine called for Putin to push the button. And how did he avoid pushing the button? He said it's not an act of war. So what proof do you need that he's not a threat? He doesn't want the West. He doesn't want the war. He didn't even want Donbass and tried for 8 years to avoid the problem with the Minsk agreement that they used to deceive him. And so he wants all of Europe. What for? Is Europe a collection of failed states? That's what it is, a collection of failed states. There's not one successful state in Europe. And just the other day, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, Liz Truss, she was the Prime Minister as recently as 2 years ago. She had to go to Hungary to have an interview because they won't let her be interviewed in England. And what did she say? She said, look, somebody has taken over our country. We're not even allowed to protect our 12-year-old girls from gang rapes. We're not even allowed to investigate it. Well, that's a failed state, isn't it? Now, we just had a report, and guess where it appears first in the news? In India. In the India Times or something. Why? Because everybody in Europe is afraid. What's just happened? Two Muslim immigrant invaders in Sweden captured a 13-year-old girl, gang raped her repeatedly at knife point. The police caught them. They have all the evidence, the DNA, the sperm. They even filmed the gang rapers even filmed themselves doing the rape. They have all this evidence. They take them to court, and the judge says, dismissed. They said, what do you mean? Said, oh, they were just acting out their cultural values. No prison sentence, refused the deportation request, turned them loose to continue their gang rapes. Well, this is a failed state. No women are safe. So we now have in Britain and in Sweden, the law no longer protects children and women from gang rape because it's a cultural value.
How could it have come to this, Paul?
It's a celebration of multiculturalism. See, the judge is now admitting multiculturalism has a big price.
Yeah.
Lawlessness, but you have to accept it.
Yeah.
Multiculturalism is more important than lawful treatment of women.
Yeah.
That was the judge's ruling.
Yeah.
And so a multiculturalism, we got to accept their cultural values.
Yeah. They don't have to assimilate. We have to embrace their values. Yeah.
We have to accept their lawlessness.
Yeah.
Because multiculturalism is so important. So this is the paradigm. You see it throughout the United States. You see it in the universities, you see it everywhere. We even have Democrat cities that are sanctuaries so that law can't reach in and get the illegal entrance.
Right.
You see, we have California that had that policy, they may still have it, where a person of color could steal $950 per store per day.
Yeah.
So you could hit 10, 20 stores at 1,000 times a hit, because $950 is 1,000, and walk away with $10,000, $20,000 every day. So, because well, this is cultural values, and California says they're going to make illegal aliens policemen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's this multicultural paradigm, and it's so strong that a Swedish judge isn't going to punish people for raping little girls at knife point, because it's cultural values, and they are a multicultural society. So this is what I mean, and it's just as bad in Germany. It's and in Denmark, and Norway. In Norway, I reported several years ago from this Swedish newspaper. It's the Swedish newspapers themselves, that 25% of Swedish women were afraid to leave the house.
Yeah.
So these are failed states. That's all they are. What the hell does Putin want with them? What does anybody want with them?
Yeah.
They're being overrun, and they're not going to be white ethnic countries much longer. So there's no reason for Russia. There's nothing there. And even the German economy now is collapsing because of all the sanctions and the energy costs. And Liz Truss said in her interview, I don't know if she's correct, she said in her interview that the energy price in Great Britain is 4 times higher than in the United States. So you just try to imagine, how do you survive? How does a mobile society survive when energy costs are 4 times what they are in the United States? German industry, they can't compete with these fuel costs and all these and all of these sanctions that make it impossible to have foreign suppliers. If you need an input and it's in Russia and you can't get it because you're violating the sanctions. So the whole thing is an insanity, and there's no stability in this much chaos. See, the chaos is everywhere, Larry. It's everywhere. There's not anywhere there's not chaos. Nowhere. I can't think of a single institution, not a single country, not a single place anywhere. There's chaos. Everywhere there's chaos. Well, if there's no stability, then you're going to have all kinds of troubles, and all sorts of unexpected things are going to happen. And the great danger, which I've been stressing for years, is that since the Russians and the Americans now totally distrust one another, one false warning of incoming missiles, it's all over.
Yeah.
Keep reminding people, during the Cold War, there were many false warnings, and nobody believed them because the two governments were working together to defuse the situation.
Yeah.
For today, we have raised the level of tension so high, they're higher now than they were during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Which is saying a lot.
Which is saying a lot. That who's going to say, oh, it's just a mistake? When Trump is asking openly, he didn't do this quietly to Zelensky, if we give you the missiles, can you hit Moscow? Now, these are the reasons to get down on Trump. That's the kind of reason we should say, oh, we're losing confidence in him. Not because of some Epstein files. The Epstein files, what do they mean? It's a Mossad spy operation. But missiles hitting Moscow, if you're asking You're asking your proxy in the war, if you give him the missiles, will he hit Moscow? Well, this is why we should lose confidence in Trump. And then he would say it publicly. So obviously nobody's thinking because the situation is already at high tension. And now he said, if we give you the missiles, will you hit Moscow? So they get a false alarm. That's the missiles. Push the button. There goes the United States.
Yeah, this is explored in the 50s and 60s with movies like Fail Safe and Dr. Strangelove, which was Strangelove was a parody, but it really explored what we're talking about, that and also Fail Safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, uh, we, we're going on a long time, but I think it's been a very good discussion because we're in deep trouble. And it goes far beyond what happens to Trump's domestic agenda or the Epstein files. Um, I don't think the files can be released, and it will not be because Trump's implicated. He may be implicated, but that's not the reason they won't be released. They won't be released because they show that Israel established a spy network, a honey trap, and has blackmail information over the main figures in our leadership. And we cannot operate independently of Israel's foreign policy. That's the fact. That is far more serious than having sex with an underage girl. I mean, what is underage in the first place? It's arbitrary. When in the 1950s in Georgia, and I think the 60s, the age of legal consent for a female was 14 years old.
Hmm.
Uh, how did it get raised to 18? See, different states had different legal ages. I don't know whether this 18 is a federal thing or just a state thing, but uh, the reason they raised the age of consent was, and Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the Harvard professor and U.S. Senator in the 1960s, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, uh, I don't remember whether they were his studies or whether he had collected all of the studies. Uh, he said, look, our liberal welfare programs have destroyed the black family. What the welfare, the family can't collect the welfare if the husband is present.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, so the man goes out of the house, and he said, the next step was that the young black girls learned they could escape mother's control if they got pregnant. Because once they had a baby, they qualified for child support, welfare, child support, and housing allowance and got their own apartments. And so what was happening was a proliferation of children without fathers.
Yeah.
And I think they raised the age of consent trying to stop that. They were trying to stop 14-year-old girls having babies.
Or they could have just changed the welfare laws.
Well, that was another paradigm that couldn't be changed.
Yeah.
You can never, the liberals were so committed to the welfare, and you couldn't have you couldn't have changed them. So and I think it was done at the state levels. The states were saying, "God, look at this," and so I think they started raising the age of consent. Today, there are countries in the world in which the age of consent's 14 or even less.
Well, actually, I think there's some states in the South where you get married at 14 still.
Uh, you may be able to. Certainly, you could be married at 17. Um, and Virginia Guthrie, who claims to be an Epstein victim, 17. Um, the real question is, if it's arbitrary, what's a child? And it varies depending on what, I don't know, but it varies. Uh, are we misfocused on what the real problem is? So, but these questions won't get explored, they won't get answered. We don't have a media, we have a propaganda system for the men in black.
Yeah,
That's what the American media is. It's a propaganda system for the men in black. And so we can't deal with the problems because programs like yours or others who are getting out information, they don't have that kind of reach.
right.
And it's important and it helps a lot of people who want to know what's going on and like to think beyond the box of the official narrative. It's very important what you do, but it's not like we have a media doing that. And so that makes all the things we've talked about very difficult to do anything about.
Yeah,
It's just very difficult. And um, but once again, I wish Trump's people could get focused that it's not the purient sex interest in the Epstein files that's important. And if it's important at all, it's because it was a honey trap for our ruling establishment. And that is important, but it's nowhere near as important as the forces that are driving us into wars.
yeah,
These will be big wars. You know, it's not Iraq. Well, look, we couldn't even beat the Afghanis, right? We couldn't defeat the Taliban. They didn't have a navy or an air force or missiles. We couldn't defeat the Taliban and had to give up and leave. Well, how in the hell are we going to defeat Iran? Immeasurably more powerful. How are we going to defeat Russia, China? Why do they even have in their head the notion of preparing for war with Russia and China and Iran? You have to be insane. You have to be insane. And if you're insane, you can't be reached by reason or analysis. And you can't find any sign of this in the foreign policy community. It's not discussed. It's not. There's a guy at George Washington University in Johnson, and he puts out almost every day Johnson list, and it's a list of the foreign policy uh, community's articles about Russia and Ukraine and all of that. You never see anything intelligent. Well, occasionally you see something intelligent, but it's extremely rare. And it's always by people treated as outsiders, like John Heller. Uh, uh, so the people who are supposed to be trained to be aware of foreign policy issues and give good analysis and prepare us to understand, and they're total failures. There's nothing there to read that helps. I just quit looking at it because it's not worth looking through. There's no help. You don't get any information that's pertinent or relevant. It's all about their stupid assumptions and dreams and all their false accusations against Russia. Well, Russia's going to take the world, it's going to take Europe. Uh, well, how can anybody be trained in foreign affairs and reach such utterly stupid positions? It's inexplicable.
Yeah, it's the destruction of the West and Western culture, Western values, Western traditions. And your explanation is that they're insane. I, it's hard for me to accept that they're that stupid, that naive. Uh, they know better, but what's driving them towards this destruction? The way I see it, there's other things going on, other forces that control them. I mean, they
Career success, career success. They got to be funded. It's immediate questions. The think tank has to be funded. The department has to be funded. Career success. Um, if you turn, there goes your funding. You don't have time. So it's the career success. It's the pressure of uh, being part of the group, not getting excluded, not taking an alternative position. Hey, you be quiet. Be quiet. No, no, no. She's demanding her shrimp. Um, we
yeah.
better end this. It's getting too long for people to watch. But I think I say they're insane. I don't know. It's really career success. You can't if you leave the narrative. What becomes of you? You've dropped out. You're a fallout. You're bypassed. They go on. They don't need you. They don't need you.
But those controlling the funding, those controlling these think tanks and all that, they don't see the light either.
The military security complex. That's where most of the money comes from.
Yeah.
It either comes from the corporations or the Pentagon or, and a lot of it's just institutionalized. It's institutionalized. And what I mean by that is it's not something they think about. It's just the way things do.
Right.
It's the way things roll. Like you get up in the morning, you shave, you go to work. It's just an institutionalized thing.
And once that's established, you don't rock the boat. You don't take a chance on losing your job, losing funding, losing your career, losing your
Yeah,
future. Yeah.
yeah, what becomes of you? You got a mortgage and a car payment and a kid in school, and it's not easy to change. And I think that's been the whole message of this entire program today, the whole discussion. The men in black, you can't change. They won't let you. It cuts across their interests.
And it's wrapping it up, and Trump can't change it either.
That's what exactly the truth. Exactly the truth. The president can't change it either. It's not just Trump, no president. I saw it in the Reagan administration. I mean, I know the pressure that comes in to stop things they don't want. And if you go against them, you're excluded, even if you succeed. And
Yeah.
I wrote an article about my time in the Reagan administration, which shows what it's really like.
Yeah.
And, I had the president's backing. I had the backing of the Secretary of Treasury. I had the backing of Republicans and Democrats in Congress. And if I hadn't had all that backing and I hadn't just come from the Wall Street Journal where I could fire back at the New York Times and the rest of the media trying to do me in, nothing would have happened. There'd been no tax policy, tax reduction. There would have been no end of the Cold War. the, the powers out there are just powerful, just strong, and hardly anybody wants to go against them. They expect me to go along with them and then be rewarded with multi-million-dollar jobs.
Yeah.
And when I didn't do that, they were caught off guard. They said, "What the hell is this fool doing? He's moving. He's losing his chance to be one of us." So that's the way it really works. People can look. My site has a search engine, and you can look it up and read my time with the Reagan administration. Hey, you.
Hmm.
Anyhow, she says my time now is hers, and to get my butt out of this chair and come tend to what she wants. So I'm giving in to her.
All right. Paul, thanks once again for the uplifting conversation.
Well, it's truthful, Larry. It's
I know.
people need to know. See, everything they blame on the president and Congress, it's wrong. It's the men in black. They got to learn who to blame.
Yeah.
As long as they're blaming the victims of the men in black, the representatives, the senators, the president, the agency heads, they are the victims of the men in black. They're not the ones selling you out. It's the power the men in black have. And the Americans have got to realize and grow up and be adults and understand what the real problem is. They all blame, Congress. The public's belief in Congress is minuscule. It's down there with the belief in the media. It's way low. Well, it's not the Congress' fault. It's the money and the politics
Right.
that gives all the power to the men in black, and the people you have to blame are the men in black and whoever the fools were, the Supreme Court, who gave the okay to money determining politics.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. And everything we discuss has to be understood in that framework. And that's why nothing can get done that people think needs to get done. And they need to be aware of that. And I think that's what this program brings out. I think what we've done today is to bring that out. And in which, if we have, we've done a damn good thing.
Well, Paul, we will continue to do that kind of thing as long as we can. So, and Paul, closing remark from me, you deserve a lot of credit for sticking with it all these years, for giving up what could have been an easy road for you in government and politics all these years. But, you told the truth, you rejected all the baloney, and you're still at it now all these years. So, not many people do that. They just go along with the program, go along to get along. So,
That's right. That's what it is.
well,
Well, thank you, Larry. I appreciate the recognition you gave me. Thank you very much.
we'll be continuing, Paul. Okay, that's your cat.
And you're a brave fellow yourself.
Okay, Paul. We'll continue it. See
So
you.
long for now.
Okay.